Hi, everyone. This is Marilyn Bradford, and I would like to welcome you to my Left Turn podcast. What is your left turn? Writing a blog, parenting in a different way, letting go of the old because you are aware of something greater. Left turns are choices we can all make. It's about a willingness to step into the unknown in any area of your life, to trust yourself, to risk creating or trying something new. It's about letting your true uniqueness shine. The greatest people who have lived, artists, statesmen, writers, explorers, musicians, have all been people willing to turn left. What capacities do you have that you have not acknowledged? What would your life and the world be like if you were willing to turn left? Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Left Turn. I have a lovely guest today, Monica Gilliam, and I'm very excited. She has some incredible stories and talents and abilities that I think are just amazing. Monica Gilliam is an acupuncturist, author, Access Consciousness Certified Facilitator, Talk to the Entities Facilitator, the founder of Talk to the Plants. And that's amazing thing we're going to get into. Her deep admiration for all living things pushes her to explore ever greater ways to create change in the world. What possibilities are available for us all to thrive here with this gorgeous earth? Thank you, Monica. I just love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to start out, you wrote a line that really kind of pinged me, and it was, sometimes walking down the path that is the straightest line to where you'd like to go looks like you're making a billion left turns from the outside. Would you talk about that, please?
Yeah. So, all right. So about 20 years ago, I was a contemporary dancer, and I was just kind of doing a bunch of things to make ends meet. And I just had this moment of like, is this enough? Like, what would I like to leave behind after I die? And I had been going to a lot of parks in Seattle, and I was just so amazed at the foresight that people had, over 100 years ago to create this space that was such a gift to everyone, plants, animals, people in that moment. And I was just so excited that people could have a reach that could last far beyond their lives. And so when I was asking, what would I like to do? I thought, I'd like to make a park. I don't know how to do that, but I would like to make a park at some point. And it seems like a really fun project for a lifetime. So I gave myself 60 years. I thought, okay, that sounds like just a fun kind of through line to direct myself to. And if I give myself 60 years, I don't have to get upset if it doesn't come together tomorrow. I don't have to judge myself or put any pressure. It's more of a fun thing for this lifetime for me. And so
that at 20, you were like, I can give myself time. I don't have to judge. At 20, I was judging myself nonstop, 7 and thinking, what do I need to get done today? That's fabulous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the judgments were in other places, but for whatever reason, I mean, I really do get that, like, when you engage with the earth, there is this kindness and space that is available just immediately as you engage. And so I had been gardening in a bunch of people's yards and stuff like that, and I just had this sense of like really getting to contribute to the earth was so much larger than me that I needed to put aside any judgments of myself to actually be able to go forward, you know. And so then in giving myself these 60 years, it's cool because it's like along the way, I've just kind of kept on asking, okay, so is this going to move me in the direction of a park? And along the way, I studied acupuncture and I got a master's degree in Chinese medicine. And the whole time I was like, I don't actually really need to be an acupuncturist. I just want to use this information for creating a park. And I don't even know how that would come together, but I just had a sense that it would. And so I know, like, from the outside, I didn't tell anybody that this is why I wanted to go to school, because I was going to have some sort of debt afterwards. And I didn't want to say, yeah, I might go into like $100,000 worth of debt to create a park in 60 years. So I just kind of have, along the way, I've kind of, for the most part, kept that little project quiet, and then just taken the steps that kind of, I have the sense, lead me toward that. And if somebody else was looking at my life from the outside, they might think, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Why are you studying acupuncture if you want to create a park? Why are you closing your acupuncture space if you have a degree in acupuncture? Why are you making these choices? But along the way, for me, it really has been, I've had to keep on asking, okay, is this leading me toward that? And simultaneously letting it go. Because in kind of being fixated on what my idea of creating a park is, sometimes it can be limiting,
Yes.
like I might have one idea when I'm 20.
Yes.
And then when I'm 30, I have more information. And so I need to be willing to let go of that idea from when I'm 20 to actually include all of the other information that I have, So yeah, so that's kind of where that came from, that thing of like, when you're choosing the path that is the straightest line for you to gather all of the information that you desire, it may look from the outside like you're like you're a bumblebee, like, where are you going?
Well, and I love what you said about I might have to let go of the idea, because a lot of people get really stuck with that. I'm going to be a doctor when I'm 20, and then 60 years later, they've never questioned along the way, and it seems like your life is about, okay, now what else? What questions can I ask? And I think that's amazing.
Well, I mean, I'm so excited about this adventure of being alive. There was one time, gosh, probably sometime in my 20s, where I contemplated suicide. And there was just, a lot of stuff going on. And I had been dating somebody who was like, you're really irritating and you have all of these problems. And then he like left. We were traveling together. He said all these things and he left. And then I was just like in a foreign country, like, oh no, I'm just irritating. Like, everything that he said about me was my worst fear come true.
Okay.
And so then I was like, man, I just have to be irritating until I die. It's horrible. Like, it's a fact. It's been confirmed. I'm horrible. So what? I'm just stuck with this. I'm just going to be horrible for a whole lifetime. And then I was like, well, I mean, what do I want to do about that? I could kill myself. And I really looked at it. I mean, I was pretty depressed in the moment, but I was like, I really considered that. And then for, a billion of different little reasons, it was like a song played and I was like, no, I like that song and I need to be alive to hear that song. And, like a little girl ran by and I was like, oh, she's really cute. Like just all of these kind of silly little things came. And then I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to kill myself. So if I'm not going to kill myself and I just have to be me, then I might as well make me somebody that I like.
Nice.
And if I like me, then it doesn't really matter if other people do, like if they do, great. And if they don't, that's okay. They don't need to, So it just really opened up that sense of like, wow, I'm alive. I get to create what that is. And I get to make it what is the most fun for me. And I don't have to worry about whether somebody else likes my life because they don't have to live it, And so then that really, it's like, I know that I had this kind of tendency toward wonder my whole life, but that just opened it up even more.
That's an amazing story, Monica. Thank you. Yes. And just not having to take as real what anybody else thinks about us or says about us, or that's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of getting a little more pragmatic about it. It's like, okay, so this person has presented me with this idea.
Yes.
And how am I going to respond to it? Like if I believe it, well, then what? Am I just stuck believing it? Or can I make changes? And if I'm going to make changes, I need to be the one who's on board with those changes, So I need to kind of really put myself in the driver's seat and back my choices,
Yes. Have your own back.
Yeah, truly. Yeah. Because I can't be looking to somebody else for like, should I wear this? Is this, it's just too time consuming, really.
Yeah. No, that doesn't work at all. That absolutely doesn't work. That's what we're, quote, supposed to do in this reality, to fit in and all of that. But no, it doesn't work at all, because then, like you say, you can't be you. And that's the greatest gift we all have for the world.
Really.
Is being us.
Well, and it's it allows us to receive the great gift that the world is.
Yes.
It's like, if you actually are truly alive,
yes,
where you're like, wow, I have a body and it can move, and I get to see colors and smell smells, it's like, if you get to start from where you are and engage with the world, then it's like you get to enjoy it, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you say a little more about receiving, whether it's the world or the earth or?
Yeah. Okay, so here's another story. Years ago, I was working for a woman. This is all kind of a similar time, like in my early 20s, and, just kind of stepping out of like the path of going to school and doing those things that I was supposed to, into, okay, now I'm quote unquote on my own, making my way. So what is it that I would like to do? And I was working for this woman, and she showed me all of this stuff about, the spirits of the earth and different things that sounded really cool, but they also sounded like kind of fairy tales, and it was like fun to think about, but I wasn't sure. I mean, nobody else had ever really talked to me about it, and so one day she said to me, hey, would you go outside and cut all of this ivy? And I was like, but I don't even know what it's like for the ivy. Like you just told me that there's this spirit to everything, and then I'm just going to go out and cut it. And does it hurt? I don't know. And so I went outside and I just was like, all right, if there's any like consciousness here that has a plan or knows what helps make things grow, can you just let me know? I have a job here. I'm supposed to cut this back. If there's anything that would like to be cut, let me know. And if there's anything that wouldn't like to be cut, let me know. I'm just going to go for it. And so then I just started kind of cutting away, and every once in a while, my hands just stopped. And I knew, like, I had asked for that. And even though it was subtle, I could have forced my hands to keep on cutting. I knew that like this was part of the response that I was getting to my question. So then I would just stop and look and investigate a little bit more. And like each time I was about to cut through the watering hose, and I was about to cut through another little tree that was hidden. And it was just like, oh my God, I asked this thing, and I'm not alone. I'm not like having to figure it all out. There is like this response to my question. And that just was so exciting. And so then I just started asking everything to talk to me. I didn't have to ask it out loud, so I didn't have to seem totally crazy if anybody was watching me. But I found more often than not that like I would have some sort of sense of a response from whatever, especially in the garden. That was something that was just very easy for me. But like even going into somebody's house, I used to help people organize their homes. I could go in there and just ask the home, like what's possible here and what would contribute to this person. And then my eyes would be taken different places. And so I had this sense of like, if I was willing to be curious and ask without like an agenda as much as possible, then I was getting information. So that's part of that receiving, that like my willingness to be curious, I wasn't met with silence. I was met with something. And it didn't show up like, people talking.
Right.
It was more just kind of like a sense to turn my head here, or just an idea that came or whatever. And so that really kind of had the effect of like getting me to realize that there's so much richness to being alive. The information that's coming to you comes from everywhere, to like your full body and even more than your body. And it doesn't have to just be something that comes in like people language. And that has a lot to do with my sense of receiving. It's like being and receiving, being alive and breathing is being a part of so much more than we can even comprehend. And that so much more is contributing to us. So that kind of like interconnectedness is something that is so delightful to me. That's a big part of like, how can I engage with everything to enjoy being here more?
That's very lovely. And you've talked a lot, where I've talked with you about nature spirits and gardening and plants, and I would love for you to expand on that, what you've done and some of the stories with that, because you have a really unique capacity, talent, ability, and just for people to know that that exists, I think is fantastic.
That's so cool. Yeah, I am just getting that more and more myself. I you know, the things that you do that you take for granted,
Mhm. Yes.
you know, and then it's not until something else from seemingly the outside shows you that not everybody does that, that you even notice, like, oh, I thought everybody would talk to plants because I was doing it, you know.
Right.
And then some years ago, I was given a plant by a friend, and it was it looked really sad. It was obviously kind of neglected. And she said, "Hey, do you want this?" And I was like, "Yes." And I took it home and I thought, "Oh, I'll just do all of the things that I do with this, like talk to it in all of these different ways." And then I realized, oh, maybe I'll share this with some people. So I did like a Facebook Live about it. And the response was really surprising, you know, that other people were interested in these different ways of engaging with plants, and that it just blew my mind that, like, oh, this is something that actually I can share. And
Mhm.
so one thing that I love to do with plants that I find really surprising, first of all, people love to have opinions about everything.
Yes, they do. Points of view.
Totally. And those points of view actually have an energetic impact on the world, and people may or may not realize that. And that's one thing that I notice a lot with plants. Like, I can go into somebody's house and look at their plants and see what their points of view, both about themselves and about the plants, are. And
So I'm going to stop you. I'd like you to say a little bit more about that. I've never heard anything quite like that.
yeah, like I there was a friend who I was visiting pretty regularly, and like every week I would go over for dinner and stuff like that. And one day I walked into her place, and she didn't have a bunch of plants, but she did have some. And then one day I walked in and I saw this one plant just looked like miserable.
Mhm.
You know, for lack of better terms, it was like kind of withered and just like got my attention, lacked luster. And I thought, oh no, buddy, I'll contribute to you as much as I can. And so I was just looking at it, and then I said, oh, look at that plant. I don't even know exactly what I said, but she said, oh, do you want that? And I was like, yeah, of course. And she said, yeah, I just found out that it's, you know, it's poisonous for my dog and all of that, you know. And so it was like, that's kind of one way that's maybe a bit more clear, a clear example of her points of view about that plant had changed in the past week.
Ah,
I had seen the plant before,
yes.
and then I saw it again, and it was really noticeably not doing well.
Mhm.
And her point of view about it being poisonous and being like a bad plant was,
A bad plant.
was actually having an impact on it, you know?
Oh, wow.
So I took it home, and honestly, you know, some people might say, oh, well, maybe she wasn't watering it or whatever. But it wasn't that. I took it home and I noticed that the moment I took it home, it already started to be kind of perking up.
Mhm.
And then I sat with it and I just asked the plant, the consciousness of the plant. Sometimes I ask these things and I don't even have any clear idea of like what I'm directing this at. You know, like if somebody was to say how, I don't know how. I just ask, you know. So I just said, hey, plants, all of those points of view that were directed at you, like, would you let that go? You know, why not ask, right? And then I use the access clearing statement. And then also I just like sit with it and just would enjoy the plant, just allow the beauty of the plant to be a part of my world, you know,
Mm.
just sitting there with it and admiring it. I find that admiration actually is this like fertilizer for plants.
I love that.
Yeah. And so it just like the plant just started to have a different energy, whether it's that it had a different energy to everybody else in the world or it had a different energy to me, it doesn't really matter. I
Mhm,
just noticed the difference. And then I kept on feeding that difference. I kept
mhm.
on saying, yes, more impacting me, more being beautiful. Thank you for being what you are, you know? And so that's like one example where I noticed that that person's points of view were having an impact on the plant.
Mhm,
And there are other times that I go into somebody's house and I can just tell that maybe that person's depressed, you know,
mhm.
and the plants just kind of give off that energy, and it's not even super tangible in terms of like something I can put into words,
Mhm.
but I've just started to acknowledge that if I notice something, there's something to it. I don't
Yes.
have to decide what it is, but I can just ask,
Yeah.
like, so if I go into a place and I notice that all of the plants are like wilted, I can just be like, hey, how are you doing? you know? And then maybe the person's like, oh my gosh, I haven't had a chance to be at home, or I've been really struggling or whatever. So it's like that's a way that I kind of use my own interests, and
Mhm.
I'm interested in plants and admiring them all the time as another way to get information, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It seems like your presence around plants changes things. I remember a story that uh, someone we both know was saying about how you all went over to this house in Texas and it began to change the plants. Just so, would you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, it's funny because just recently, so a lot of my friends, because, if I'm around a plant, I'm going to be talking about it. And so the people who are around me more begin to notice plants differently than they had before they hung out with me, so
Yes.
so I have a friend who has really started to engage with plants in a different way. And he was at my house one day and he said, wow, when you came downstairs, all of the plants changed. Like the energy of the plants changed. And it's so funny because I'm not around the plants when I'm not there,
Right.
so I hadn't noticed, but he and some other people have kind of shared with me like, yeah, when you're around, the plants are more alive. And I would say that part of that is that it's like I have been just so interested and turning my attention toward the plants all the time that that's just something that walks around with me.
Ah,
And like if you think about it, with people,
mhm.
we can use people as an example. If somebody ignores you all the time, how much do you open up around them? You
Right.
know,
Right.
but if somebody comes to you and they're just interested in you and don't have any need for you to be a certain way, what does that create? And so I get that a lot of people, like this surprises me, but I have to remind myself sometimes, a lot of people can walk by plants and not even notice them.
Yes, that's very true.
I am not that. I
No.
I a plant and I'm like, wow, wow, how is it like this? This is amazing. Look at those leaves. I wonder how many different creatures come and visit that, like, wow, it's alive and it's doing all of this amazing stuff. So that's kind of like the background of my world. To pass by each plant, I'm immediately like interested, and that interest is kind of like a wave
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
that extends beyond me, that is like basically like, hi, 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 how are you, you know And that, I think, has a lot to do with how plants respond to me, you know. So immediately, like as they are received, they perk up, you
Mhm.
know. And it's interesting. I got a foster plant from Gary Douglas. It was so great. It was this fern that wasn't doing very well in his place, and he really loves ferns and just wants them to be really big and beautiful. And so he asked me if I would take care of this. And when I saw it, it was like, oh my God, this plant has been left to die. It was like put outside his house by the people who take care of his plants. And it just looked like, oh, this plant is really not being appreciated, you know? So I took it home and I just, honestly, I would sit with it for hours and just look at it like it was the most interesting thing ever. Because to me, it was. I just saw so much with it. And as I was sitting with it, I can't tell you how many times just sitting there, I had this sense of like, oh no, I'm doing this all wrong.
Hmm.
And and it was so strange because it was like, what am I doing wrong? Sitting? You know, like how could I possibly be sitting and looking at a plant wrong? It was so absurd in a way that it really let me know, oh, this isn't mine.
Uh-huh.
This point of view isn't mine. So what is it? So I'm aware of this every time I look at the ferns. So this is somehow in the ferns world. So
Yeah.
I just would clear that and just ask for that to like dissipate, you know, like, okay, cool, that's a point of view. It's not mine, you know, so let that go. And as I would just do that, the plant started to grow and grow. But there was still something that was weird. And I was like, what's going on? Like, are you sick? What do you need something? What is that? And then I had a friend come and visit, and he said, oh yeah, you know, one of the people who takes care of Gary's plants had cancer.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, whoa. And so we asked, like, the fern, were you trying to heal this person's cancer? And it was like, yes. And first of all, I was surprised, you know,
Yes.
even though plants are medicine and plants are totally healing us in all of these ways, both energetically and physically and all of that. And I just asked the fern, I was like, oh, can that person receive it? And it was like, no. And I said, would you please let that go? You know, you don't have to try and heal that person if they can't receive it. And immediately, like the colors changed. And
Wow.
it was like my friend who was there was like, whoa, you know, so it was great. I had some outside affirmation that like actually just that created such a change. And it was like, wow, you know, the what an impact it creates on the rest of the world when we do not receive nurturing from the world. You know,
Yes.
so here was this fern that was desiring to contribute to this cancer, and I could see and perceive like a kind of chink in its energy
Uh-huh.
from not being received. And then when that was shifted, then all of a sudden it just started to flourish. And so that's one thing that I find, you know, my willingness to receive from plants as they are has an impact of kind of allowing them to like unfurl in a
Uh-huh.
way,
Mhm.
energetically be more than other people will allow them to be,
Yes.
especially the people who don't even notice them, you know? And that has a really nurturing impact.
Well, and if someone said to you, Monica, just give me some tips. I'm really new at this for my garden or my house plants, or what could you offer as suggestions? And
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say it's like if you're going to listen to something, then you need to be quiet enough to hear
Mm,
what that thing has to say to you. And a lot of the time, people are we've been taught to judge ourselves so much and try and do everything right, that when somebody is trying to garden, they have already these expectations of themselves to do it right.
Yes.
And that it's a loaded thing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, hey, would you be willing just to be quiet with the garden and let the garden talk to you rather than use the garden as a way to judge you?
Lovely. Wonderful. Yes.
Because a lot of the time, it's like if people see a plant that's quote unquote not doing well based on what they're expecting of it, then they get mad at themselves.
Yes.
And when they get mad
I've
at
done
themselves,
that. Yes.
yeah. And when they get mad at themselves, they start listening more to that upset with themselves than to what's actually going on.
Mhm.
And it may be that, something totally unexpected is going on if you allow yourself to ask, like, hey, what's up with you, and not make it all about yourself. Then you get more information. So it's like very simple and kind of a big ask at the same time for gardeners to be able to go there, whether it's just with your potted plants or outside, and first of all, just say, would you be willing to not judge you in relation to the plants and not use the plants as an excuse to judge you? Just that is world changing.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm going to do that
Yeah.
in my new garden.
And then from there, it's like allowing yourself to be aware of what the garden has to say or the contribution that it is. Then that's where the magic starts to open up.
Yes.
And then, then you start to have more of a sense of like, oh, this plant would like to be watered, or, oh, because you're more available to pick up those cues, however they show up for you. Because of course, for each person, it's really going to be quite different,
Yes, absolutely. I think that's just wonderful suggestions, and I'm definitely going to have a different relationship with my garden this summer. And I'm really looking forward to starting. I want to make sure I get it right. Talk to the plants. Do you have any plans for that, or?
I I kind of started Talk to the Plants over the whole COVID stay inside your house period. And so I've done some stuff online. And so there are some some little free telecalls that I've done and some other telecalls that I've done that are like in my shop. But I would really like to do something in person,
Yes, with the plants.
Yeah, exactly. So that we can really play with that. So that's kind of still in the making. I have a pretty busy schedule. So finding a place for that's in the works. But yeah, I'm just honestly, I'm regularly surprised that people are interested in this.
Well, people are interested in plants, even if it's from a very linear, but they know somewhere, oh, that's beautiful. They just don't have the kinds of information and things you were talking about today. And I see that as a very viable, real contribution to the world and the earth. So I would like to encourage you to get that going.
Yeah, I will. This is great. Thank you.
Well, then thank you so much, Monica. This has just been an inspiration, truly. I'm so glad you came on. And I already have a very different way of I'm noticing of being with the plants in my house and looking outside, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's just Ever since I was a little girl, I was like, wow, we live on a planet with plants, and not all of the planets have plants. And that's cool. And then when you look at any one of them, the way that they're such an example of nurturing and receiving that goes beyond anything that you can even comprehend,
Yes. Yes.
and so just the more that I like walk around in this world and notice every like blade of grass that is coming out from the cracks in the sidewalk, it's just like there's this rugged, just nurturing that's springing up everywhere that actually is contributing to our bodies
Yes.
in ways that we may take for granted. And it's just such a reminder that there is so much available to take care of us.
Yes.
And if you will allow yourself to receive it, it's like it's free. You don't have to
It's
pay.
free.
You can walk down the street and just recognize that thing that's growing over there, that tree is a host for so many, and it is taking care of me too. Wow, what a cool planet I'm on. What a gift to be here.
Thank you. And Monica, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way, or your website, or?
Yeah, so they can go to talktotheplants.com, or I have Talk to the Plants on Instagram. They can send me a message there. Talk to the Plants on Facebook. That's pretty easy. And I'm just starting to create like a Telegram channel so that I can be popping little bits of plant information and probably too many videos of my kittens and so if people go to Talk to the Plants on Instagram, they'll get more information.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a really lovely conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining this episode of Left Turn. I wonder what embracing left turns could create in your life. What magical possibilities might show up. Remember, when you choose left turns, you are joining a group of the most creative and brilliant people the world has ever known.